Come close to the fire, and let me tell you of a man who saved his entire nation and was rewarded with chains. 23 times he sailed against the enemy fleet. 23 times he came home victorious. And yet his own king feared him, doubted him, and twice tried to destroy the very man who stood between Korea and total ruin. This is not a story of a nation cheering for its hero. It is the story of a hero his own nation almost threw away. He built strange iron-shelled warships that breathed fire like dragons and used them to defy impossible odds. In his final battle, facing near certain death, he uttered 11 words that may have saved his country one last time. His name was Hansan, and this is the whole of his extraordinary, unjust, unforgettable story. Let the fire burn low, and let us begin in a quiet corner of Korea, long before anyone knew his name. He was born in the year 1545 into a family of modest, fading nobility in the kingdom of Joseon. As a boy, young Hansan was expected to follow the traditional path, to study for the great civil service examinations. He studied diligently for years, hoping to become a government official as generations of his family had been. But something in him was drawn instead toward archery, horsemanship, and the discipline of the military arts. In his late 20s, he made a decision that surprised his family. He abandoned scholarship and pursued the military examinations instead. His first attempt ended in humiliating failure when his horse stumbled and he broke his own leg in the trial. Undeterred, he tied a splint from a willow branch and finished the examination anyway in visible agony. He would not pass and earn his military rank until the age of 31, remarkably late for a man of his ambition. For generations, the kingdom of Joseon had lived in relative peace, its wars mostly distant memories. Its government was dominated by scholars and endless court factions, more skilled in poetry and politics than warfare. The military was chronically underfunded, its equipment aging, its readiness a low priority for a court that feared invasion less than rival factions. Hansan rose slowly through this neglected system, serving in remote frontier postings against raiders in the north. He earned a quiet reputation, not for brilliance or charm, but for stubborn honesty and refusal to bend to corruption. That honesty made him enemies among ambitious men who preferred officers willing to look away from wrongdoing. More than once, his integrity cost him promotions, demotions, and the quiet resentment of more politically skilled rivals. But in 1591, on the recommendation of a powerful friend, he was given an unexpected and crucial appointment. Commander of the left naval district of Gyeolla province, a quiet posting for now. Something about the political winds troubled Hansan deeply, even before any invasion had begun. Rumors drifted across the sea of a fearsome new warlord who had united all of Japan under his ambitious rule. Rather than wait passively, Hansan began preparing his small fleet for a war almost no one else believed was truly coming. He revived and perfected an old, half-forgotten Korean design, a warship shaped like a great armored turtle. Its curved deck was covered in iron plates and sharp spikes, making it nearly impossible for enemy soldiers to board. A carved dragon's head at its prow could belch smoke and cannon fire, terrifying and disorienting any enemy before it. Cannons lined its sides, capable of unleashing devastating volleys. No ordinary wooden ship could survive at close range. Few in the government paid much attention to this quiet commander's unusual, expensive preparations, far from the capital. His foresight would prove, within months, to be the single most important decision made by anyone in the entire kingdom. Across the sea, that rumored warlord was very real indeed. His name was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Born a peasant, he had clawed and schemed his way to become the supreme ruler of a newly unified Japan. But unification alone did not satisfy his boundless ambition. He dreamed of conquering an empire beyond his own shores. His true target was nothing less than the mighty Ming Empire of China itself, and Korea lay directly in his path. In the spring of 1592, he unleashed a massive invasion fleet carrying tens of thousands of battle-hardened samurai. Korea's outdated coastal defenses crumbled within hours before this modern, ruthlessly efficient invading army. Fortress after fortress fell, city after city burned. The invasion swept north with terrifying, unstoppable speed. Within mere weeks, the terrified Korean king abandoned his own capital city and fled north in desperate panic. On land, Korea's poorly prepared forces could do almost nothing to slow the invading Japanese army's relentless advance. The capital city of Hansan fell within only 3 weeks of the very first Japanese soldier setting foot on Korean soil. It seemed to nearly everyone watching that the entire kingdom of Joseon might collapse within a single terrible season. Hideyoshi's plan depended entirely on one crucial element functioning perfectly: ships supplying his armies from the sea. Without a steady flow of reinforcements and supplies by water, his invading army on land would eventually starve and stall. And it was here, upon the water, that Korea still possessed one thing the invaders had not fully accounted for: a quiet, methodical naval commander named Hansan, and the strange iron ships he had spent a year preparing. In May of 1592, Hansan led his fleet out to meet the enemy for the very first time, at a place called Okpo. The Japanese ships, built for speed and boarding actions, were utterly unprepared for coordinated cannon warfare at range. Hansan's disciplined fleet unleashed devastating volleys before the enemy could ever close for boarding. Ship after Japanese ship burst into flame and sank beneath the waves, while Korean losses remained astonishingly light. It was the first Korean victory of the entire terrible war, and it electrified a nation desperate for any hope at all. More battles followed in quick succession at Sachin, at Dangpo, each one adding another victory to his growing record. At Sachin, his turtle ships fought for the very first time, smashing through enemy formations like armored battering rams. By the summer of 1592, Hansan's reputation had grown enough to trouble the Japanese command deeply. They gathered a massive fleet, nearly 70 warships, intending to crush this stubborn admiral once and for all. Hansan, studying the waters near Hansan Island, devised one of the most brilliant naval tactics of the entire age. He sent a handful of ships to lure the confident enemy fleet out into open, favorable water, away from the shallow coast. Then, at the perfect moment, his main fleet emerged and formed a devastating formation: the Crane Wing. The Japanese fleet found itself suddenly surrounded on 3 sides, caught helplessly within a closing ring of cannon fire. It became one of the most devastating naval defeats in the entire history of Japan, nearly the whole enemy fleet destroyed. The victory at Hansan Island effectively broke Japan's ability to safely supply its armies deep within Korea by sea. Such extraordinary success should have earned Hansan nothing but honor and gratitude. Instead, it earned him enemies. Chief among them was a fellow naval commander named Gyun, boastful, reckless, and consumed by bitter jealousy. Gyun had commanded ships in the same battles, yet Hansan's careful leadership had earned nearly all the credit and praise. Rather than accept this honestly, Gyun began quietly spreading rumors and complaints back to the royal court. He claimed Hansan was overly cautious, disobedient, perhaps even secretly disloyal to the crown itself. In the anxious, paranoid atmosphere of a court already terrified by invasion, such whispers found fertile, dangerous ground. King Seonjo, desperate and frightened, grew increasingly suspicious of the very admiral who had saved his kingdom's coastline. It is an old, bitter pattern in history. The most loyal servants often become the most convenient targets for blame. In 1597, the accusations against Yi Sun-sin finally reached their poisonous, devastating climax. He was formally accused of disobeying a direct royal order and of secretly harboring disloyal, treasonous ambitions. The charges were almost entirely fabricated, built upon one Gyun's jealous whispers and the king's own fearful paranoia. Yi Sun-sin was stripped of his command, arrested, dragged in chains all the way back to the distant capital. He endured brutal, agonizing torture, the standard treatment for accused traitors under the harsh laws of the era. Through it all, he never once broke, never confessed to crimes he had never actually committed. Only the desperate pleading of a few remaining loyal officials spared him from execution at the very last moment. Instead, he was stripped of all rank entirely and ordered to serve as an ordinary common soldier. A stunning, bitter fall. And command of the entire Korean Navy was handed instead to the very man whose jealousy had destroyed him. One Gyun. One Gyun proved, almost immediately, to possess none of the discipline or careful strategic patience of his predecessor. He drank heavily, ignored the counsel of experienced officers, and grew careless with the safety of his powerful fleet. In the summer of 1597, the Japanese Navy, sensing fresh and obvious weakness, launched a sudden coordinated attack. At the Battle of Myeongnyang, one Gyun's poorly positioned fleet was caught completely by surprise and overwhelmed. Nearly the entire Korean Navy, painstakingly built and hardened over 5 years of hard-won victories, was utterly destroyed. One Gyun himself died, attempting to flee the disaster he had so carelessly created through his own reckless negligence. In a single reckless afternoon, everything Yi Sun-sin had spent years building was reduced to ash and floating wreckage. Korea's control of the sea, its one great advantage in this terrible war, had simply, catastrophically ceased to exist. Panic swept through the royal court as the true scale of the disaster at Myeongnyang became horrifyingly clear. With the Japanese Navy now free to roam unchallenged, the entire western coastline of Korea lay suddenly, terrifyingly exposed. In desperation, the very king who had disgraced and imprisoned Yi Sun-sin now had only one place left to turn. A royal messenger rode hard to find the disgraced former admiral, now serving humbly as a common foot soldier. Yi Sun-sin was reinstated at once as commander of what remained of Korea's shattered, nearly non-existent naval forces. He harbored no bitterness, no desire for revenge against the king who had so unjustly wronged him. Only grim, immediate duty. When he finally assessed what remained of the once proud Korean Navy, the truth was almost unbearably grim. Only 12 ships remained. 12 against an enemy fleet that now numbered well over 130 warships. Many in the frightened royal court urged him simply to abandon the sea entirely and fight only on land instead. King Seonjo himself sent orders suggesting Yi Sun-sin disband his tiny remaining fleet and join the land forces instead. Yi Sun-sin's response became one of the most famous, defiant lines in all of Korean history. "I still have 12 ships," he wrote back. "As long as I live, the enemy will never take our seas." It was not arrogance. It was the calm, calculated certainty of a man who understood the sea better than any of his enemies. He knew of a narrow, treacherous strait near the island of Jindo, called Myeongnyang, where the ocean currents ran violently fierce. If he could lure the massive enemy fleet into that narrow, dangerous channel, its sheer numbers might become a fatal weakness instead of a strength. It was an enormous, terrifying gamble, but it was, quite simply, the only real chance that remained. In October of 1597, the massive Japanese fleet finally approached the narrow strait, confident and utterly overwhelming. Hansan positioned his 13 ships, all he could gather, directly within the narrowest, most treacherous part of the passage. For a terrifying moment, as the enemy fleet surged forward, every other Korean captain hesitated, frozen with dread. Hansan's own flagship surged forward alone, directly into the heart of the entire approaching enemy armada. Watching their admiral's astonishing, singular courage, the other captains finally found their own courage and followed him in. Then, at the perfect calculated moment, the fierce tidal current suddenly reversed, exactly as Hansan had precisely predicted. The powerful current threw the crowded, tightly packed Japanese ships into chaotic disarray, crashing helplessly into one another. Korean cannons tore mercilessly through the tangled, helpless enemy formation, one devastating volley after another. By the battle's astonishing end, 31 Japanese warships lay sunk or shattered. Not a single Korean ship was lost. The victory at Myeongnyang remains, to this day, remembered as one of the most astonishing naval triumphs in world history. Word of the impossible victory spread like wildfire, restoring desperately needed hope across a war-weary, exhausted nation. Hansan used the crucial breathing room this victory provided to rebuild Korea's shattered naval strength once more. New turtle ships were constructed, crews were trained, discipline and morale were painstakingly restored, ship by ship. Meanwhile, on land, the wider war ground on in brutal stalemate, neither side able to achieve a truly decisive final victory. Then, in the autumn of 1598, unexpected news arrived from across the sea that would finally change everything. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the ambitious warlord who had started this entire terrible war, had suddenly died in Japan. With their ambitious leader gone, the exhausted Japanese forces in Korea began a full, careful withdrawal back toward home. Hansan faced one final, crucial decision as the defeated Japanese army prepared its final retreat across the sea. He could simply allow the withdrawing enemy fleet safe passage home and finally, mercifully, end the long war. Or he could strike one final, decisive blow, ensuring this invading army could never again threaten his homeland. He chose to fight, intercepting the retreating Japanese fleet in the narrow strait near Noryang in November of 1598. It became one of the largest, most chaotic naval battles of the entire brutal war, fought desperately in pre-dawn darkness. Amid the smoke, the flames, and the deafening chaos of battle, a single stray bullet found its way to Hansan himself. He fell, mortally wounded, in the very final hours of a war he had fought so tirelessly for so very long. And in that final, desperate moment, with the battle still raging fiercely all around him, he gave one last, extraordinary order. "The battle is at its height," he said. "Do not announce my death. Do not let it disturb our men." He understood, even as his own life ended, that panic among his men could still lose this final, crucial battle. His loyal nephew, at his side, quietly took up his admiral's armor and continued issuing commands in his uncle's name. The battle raged on without any Korean sailor realizing their beloved admiral had already fallen among them. By the battle's exhausting end, the Japanese fleet was shattered beyond any hope of recovery or reorganization. Only after the fighting had finally ceased, did his stricken officers reveal the devastating truth to the exhausted fleet. Their brilliant, endlessly steady Admiral, who had never once lost a single battle in his entire remarkable career, was gone. He had won his final battle even in death, his very last order a final act of selfless, quiet leadership. News of his death spread grief across the entire exhausted nation he had saved, not once, but twice, from utter ruin. The king who had imprisoned and tortured him now posthumously showered him with honors, titles, and elaborate memorials. It was, in many ways, too little, offered far too late to a man who had never once truly needed royal approval at all. 23 naval battles, 23 victories, not a single defeat in his entire remarkable, unlikely career. His turtle ships are remembered today as among the very first ironclad warships in all of recorded human history. And his story endures as a quiet, powerful reminder of something uncomfortable, yet deeply important to remember. The most loyal, most capable people are not always recognized, trusted, or rewarded fairly by those they faithfully serve. Sometimes, greatness is not about being trusted. It is about doing what is right, especially when no one else truly believes in you. This has been the story of Yi Sun-sin, the Admiral his own kingdom almost lost, not once, but twice over. Sleep now and remember that quiet integrity, even when unrewarded, can still hold back the darkest of storms.